Welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. My name is Jamira Burley, and I'm here with my brilliant co-host, Brea Baker. And today we are digging into what's on everyone's mind, the economy. Let's do a deep dive into how economic instability, inflation, food shortages, trade tensions under the Trump second administration are impacting everyday Americans, especially marginalized communities, and what alternative economic futures we can imagine for ourselves and our children.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing everything from food recalls to rising grocery prices and tariffs, all due to Trump's lack of diplomacy. American wallets have been hit hard, and there doesn't seem to be any relief in sight. We're going to get into it all and what may be over the horizon for folks to look forward to.
Because the question is, how do we survive this economic downturn, and how do we do a people-centered economy that actually works for everyone? But first, let's get into headlines.
Whew, and these headlines are crazy. Trump,
I can't even watch the news anymore.
No, literally. I mean, sometimes these feel like the Onion articles, and I'm just like, what is happening? So Trump really got on Beyonce's internet and said that Canada is going to be the 51st state. And Canadian politicians have been in an uproar about it. They're claiming that this is an act of war, on top of him already holding new tariffs against Canada that they are then returning the favor. And so we're seeing like 25% tax hikes. American products are being pulled off of Canadian shelves. It is insanity. And also, how are you going to absorb Canada as a 51st? Like, none of it makes any sense, but he's truly, truly giving us more enemies, especially when we're already on the outs with our neighbors to the south in Mexico. Now we have no real good allyship and diplomacy to the north in Canada.
Yeah, and I'm sure for the international community, if they are looking at this and saying, if America can do this to one of their closest and longest allies, what the heck are they going to do to us? And I think at a time where every economy around the world is still recovering from COVID-19, and America has seen some of the best recovery, the last thing we need to do is to put more financial constraints on everyday Americans by going to war, or even if it's a war of words, right? Creating the tension, the speculation that now is being impacted, and we see the implications of that on the stock market, but how that is impacting people's retirement, how they're impacting people's ability to maintain their current employment or seek a future employment is all related to these tensions and this unnecessary conflict that we're creating with our partners, especially because what he is disagreeing with, the trade policies that he's disagreeing with in relationship to Canada, is a policy that he actually installed during his first administration. That is real iron.
With his own actions, which is wild. Yeah.
So not only are we dealing with someone in a temper tantrum, but it's a temper tantrum about his own policies that he's disagreeing with. So
this is why you can't trust this man with no nuclear buttons, no true decision making on a global scale, because he doesn't even, our relationship with Canada is not one that I ever had on my bingo card being on the rocks. Like, this is not a nation that, agitates us and that we need to be worried about. And yet we're beefing now? Like, what's really good?
And as I mentioned, this is just not like a geopolitical thing. It impacts people's everyday lives. And one of the stories that I want to talk about is this new partnership by DoorDash. I'm sure many of you have seen it. They now have a partnership with Carnell. Can I say that right? Carnell. And they basically are saying you buy now, pay later. This is happening on DoorDash. So they are recognizing that people are spending less on takeout or groceries, and they're trying to create a way where people can still participate in the economy in some sort of way by saying that, buy your groceries now and pay later. What does that say about the current state of the economic climate that we're in, when people cannot afford their most basic needs, like groceries, like eggs, like that, like the inflation costs for those products are skyrocketing all over the country. And if you have everyday Americans not being able to feed themselves, that creates a very hostile environment that doesn't just impact our neighbors to the south and north, but also impact folks right here in this country.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Eggs on layaway is mind blowing. But
that's even also, crazy.
But also DoorDash,
That's a bar though. Eggs on layaway. Huh?
Real, like,
I mean, it did remind me of, I saw a story. I know that it's related, but not related. It's related. A story about how bodegas are now, because eggs are so expensive, bodegas are now selling eggs individually, like Lucy's, because people can't afford a whole dozen.
Yeah, which is crazy. Eggs used to be like what, $4 a dozen?
$3.79, like, $4. Right. Yeah.
They're going for over $10. It's mind blowing.
Now I'm like, do I even like eggs?
Girl. Exactly. But then it's like, okay, now I realize all these recipes I needed for like baking or whatever the case may be. But also the other thing that's mind blowing is like DoorDash is not just groceries, but also when people are buying fast food. So you get McDonald's on layaway, you getting Checkers and Wingstop and saying, I got that $20 for you next paycheck. These are not expensive things. Like in the past, it was like, okay, I need to buy this couch. I need to buy this TV. I need to repair this big piece of furniture and let me get on a payment plan for it. People on payment plans for $20 purchases because they're not $20 anymore. Like it's just skyrocketing. And that's
but even if it is $20, people have less disposable income, right? People are debating whether or not they're going to feed themselves over keeping a roof over their heads and keeping the lights on. Like that is not a debate that I would want to have with myself. So I can't imagine the struggles that some people are faced with, especially those who have children. So prices are rising, but also even those that didn't rise are putting amount to your point, like people are putting eggs on layaway or putting DoorDash and French fries. And I know some people are going to say, well, maybe they shouldn't order out. How do you think homeless people get access to food? How do you think should children not eat because their parents don't know how to cook? Like there's a host of different reasons why people order takeout that isn't just related to me, Jamira Burley, well-employed, who don't want to cook tonight, right? Like people sometimes
that is your business
form of way. And this might be the only form of way for people to get access to hot meals is through delivery because they themselves either can't cook, might not have the means to, or find themselves houseless.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. No, I mean, when I first moved to Atlanta, I did not have a car. And so it was like, all right, I'm walking to some place to get my groceries or to get my food, or I'm depending on delivery. And, I'm going to pay that delivery fee because it's cheaper than what I would have to be paying in insurance and gas and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
But it's getting really expensive. And then the DoorDash delivery drivers are also bearing the burden of this because there's such an uptick. They're not being paid well through DoorDash. I don't even know what the implications of this are going to be now that people are going to be doing it on layaway. Like, what does that mean for when they're getting their money? And people are already saying like, listen, I depend on tips. I'm not being paid much by the app itself for this delivery. So, I mean, it has such far-reaching implications and we should all be concerned. And it kind of goes to the fact that all of this is so avoidable. I mean, my third headline, which kind of goes to what I'd said before, but Trump has been in trade wars with people who we previously were good friends and allies with. Trade wars with Canada, trade wars with Europe. And these trade wars are guiding this U.S. economy towards a self-inflicted crisis. Yeah. It is scary to see. I mean, we already had to deal with bird flu, which is why we saw eggs prices going up. But then the USDA food recalls, which is a result of him, eliminating certain regulations in his past terms. Now we're also seeing these trade wars are increasing the cost of prices because we are more dependent on imports than a lot of people realize. So it's not just, the average American citizen depending on DoorDash, but in essence, our entire economy depends on us being able to order things through delivery, whether that's through snail mail, whether that's through DoorDash and Uber Eats or whatever the case may be. And now we're realizing it's getting more and more expensive to do so. And consumers are bearing the burden of that. And I run on this? Like that was their whole campaign was Biden's inflation and they have no plan for it and we're going to bring it down and prices have only shot up.
Which is really frustrating. I mean, say what you want about Biden. There's many things to critique about Biden, President Joe Biden. But two things I will say is that, inflation, what we saw, inflation was not just like the implications of trade wars or the rising costs abroad impacting people locally. It also was a direct implication of corporate greed. We know that 90% of inflation was a reflection of corporate greed and the lack of accountability or measures to protect the American citizens against this corporate greed. Secondly, what I will say is that Donald Trump got handed one of the best economies he could possibly have gotten from Joe Biden. He got a thriving economy, and he was able to remove billions of dollars from that economy and has risen our debt ceiling by billions of dollars in the course of less than 3 months. Yeah. Okay, so for those who voted for the Trump administration, thinking that they were going to get more money in their pockets and be able to purchase things that their most basic needs, be able to fully participate in the economy, are now realizing that this might be the largest transfer of wealth from the poor middle class to those who have the power and the access, and in many ways help to bankroll this administration. So yeah, you're not getting cheaper eggs anytime soon. You're not, because what they're trying to do is to, like, we've heard Elon Musk, right? He wants to create hard times. He wants to crash the economy. And at some point, you're going to have to take the blinders off and realize that you are dealing with an administration that does not have your best interests at heart.
Oh, 1,000,000%, because they're firing federal workers. They're defunding agencies. The prices of groceries are going up the roof. But what is Trump doing on the White House lawn? Tesla commercials. So
it has to be
the priorities are everywhere but where they need to be. And we should all be concerned, because everyone thought, or not everyone, but those who voted for Trump thought, yeah, this tax season, I'm gonna get more money, and the prices of daily expenses are gonna go down, and all of this other stuff. Where's that prosperity? I'm not.
There's prosperity in the room with us. Raise your hand.
Crickets.
Nope. Not here.
Absent. Yeah.
And it's going to get worse. My next headline is actually related to protests breaking out across the country over the change in the Postal Service. I've mentioned this on a previous episode. What many people do not realize is that the U.S. government is not meant to turn a profit. Let me say that again. The United States government is not a corporation. It is not meant to turn a profit, meaning the agencies underneath it, the departments underneath it, are not meant to turn a profit. What they should do is balance their budgets. And the fact that the Trump administration wants to eliminate, well, we know his ultimate goal is to eliminate the U.S. Postal Service and privatize it, but currently is cutting thousands of jobs across the country. And let me just say, cutting jobs does not boost the economy. You now have more people unable to participate in the labor force, who are now relying on unemployment benefits, who are not able to fully participate and, boost the economy with their purchases. But also now you are putting millions of people around the country at risk of not being able to get their mail. Because while, it's great to hear about like Amazon and UPS and all the other private like shipping companies, those places do not go to many of the far-reaching places within the United States government that the U.S. Postal Service does. The U.S. Postal Service is one of the few agencies that is enshrined within the U.S. Constitution, because the founding fathers, say what you will about those trash men, the founding fathers believed that everyone should have access to a mail service, regardless of whether or not they grew up in the Appalachian Mountains.
Appalachia.
Yes. Or like New York City, you should be able to get access to your mail. And even some of the things you purchase on Amazon and you purchase that has shipping for UPS sometimes uses U.S. Postal Service for that. So shout out to all the Postal Service workers who are protesting around the country, who are organizing themselves and standing up, recognizing that this could have devastating implications for not just the economy, but people's access to the mail.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And it's not just the USPS, which is another concerning thing, is that FedEx and UPS as well, private mail carriers are also dealing with this, are also saying, we don't know what the future of delivering international products is going to look like. And this is not just affecting those who shop on TikTok Shop. I mean, there are people who get their medicine from out of the country. Because
tell me about your recent purchases.
I mean, I give back to the economy.
Of course. You are participating in the economy for the betterment.
Yes, I don't believe in hoarding my money. It is to be spent at the stores. But no, truly, there's so many people who are realizing, like, wait, I'm not going to be able to get those products, or not without paying a hefty tax on it, because international politics is not just who's at war with one another. It also shapes who's willing to ship to one another, who's willing to trade with one another. And so we're seeing a deterioration of that.
Yeah, which sucks because we're at a time of like technical advances,
Right,
the most innovative time within America, within the world history, at least that we know of. And yet we're still faced with limitations of that due to political constraints. So on that note, we're going to take a quick break. But just to remind you all, you are watching On the Other Side of Change.
We begin tonight with the people who are really running the country right now.
Now, Trump is often wrong and misleading about a lot of things, but especially about history.
Donald Trump falling in line with President Elon Musk.
In the wake of the unsettling news that MSNBC has canceled Joy Ann Reid's primetime show, The Readout, Roland Martin and the Black Star Network would like to extend an invitation to all of the fans of Joy Ann Reid's MSNBC show to join us every night to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming on the Black Star Network for news, discussion of the issues that matter to you, and the latest updates on the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon-in-chief Donald Trump and his unprecedented assault on democracy, as well as co-president Elon Musk's takeover of the federal government. The Black Star Network stands with Joy Ann Reid and all folks who understand the power of Black voices in media. We must come together and never forget that information is power. Be sure to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered weeknights, 6 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/Roland S. Martin or download the Black Star Network app.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Before we took a break, we talked about the headlines that showed how shaky our economy is. But let's talk about how we got here and what it means for people on the ground.
Yeah, as we said, when Trump was campaigning for his second term, he promised to end inflation and to fix infrastructure. Just 100 days into this new administration, maybe not even, and people can't afford basic produce, like literally the basics. We're not living any fancier lives. The average American is not suddenly flying in private jets. As a matter of fact, we got stuff going on with the airplanes too. We have seen major food recalls causing price spikes. People cannot trust where their food is coming from, whether that be Kroger, Publix, Walmart, Pathmark, Compare Foods. And instead of stable diplomacy, Trump is offending international trade partners left and right. And this is not like the sexy thing that people are like, yeah, I stay on top of trade policy, but it does shape your everyday life. It's not just about bad vibes or about something that you need a PhD to understand. This bad policy is going to affect everything we do day to day.
Yeah, and it sucks because people are now rationing food. I read a story of a woman who recently passed away because she was only eating once a day in order to ensure that her children were able to have more than one meal. And, you know, from the outside looking in, it's very easy for us to see grocery store shelves as being full. But the prices for basic necessities like eggs have skyrocketed, and families are being forced to choose between quality and affordability. Yeah. And when you have to now pay later for your most basic necessities, like we talked earlier about the DoorDash partnership, that's not showing that the economy is actually working for the everyday American or working for the vast majority of Americans for that matter, except unless you're in the top 10% or the top 1%.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And here's the thing, what's frustrating
1,000,000%. I like that transition.
You see? You know, we're ripping off each other. We got this over here.
Find out you're a rapper in another life.
I'm a poet and they didn't even know it. No, but truly, what's also frustrating about Trump is that he'll use this economic patriotism, right? You know, America first, American companies first, American products first, made in America. And we're going to put tariffs and slap them on these global partners so that we can support things that are made in America. Number one, you're not actually supporting these American companies. You're making it harder for American companies, American farmers, local farmers and growers to actually grow their food in a way that is healthy, get that food to grocery stores, and then keep it at a competitive price. So you're not actually supporting those who are making it in America. So when you remove international products from our shelves without actually bolstering local companies and small companies at that, not just the Elon Musks of it all, you're creating a void and a gap. And then people are hungry. And then people are paying an arm and a leg to get the products that they need that are made outside of the country that just 6 months ago was at a very reasonable and affordable price. We are seeing countries retaliating, raising the prices on everything from appliances to tech. And who can blame them? I mean, when you have Trump saying, I'll absorb your country and make it my 51st state, there's no incentive for me to make it easier for citizens of your country to be able to buy products from mine. Yeah. Like, no, since you want to be that way, let's go tit for tat and see who actually wins out. And we're finding out that we are not as autonomous as we need to be saying, we're going to do it ourselves. Like, okay, maybe you could have said that after we confirmed we were able to do it ourselves. So we are paying more. We are paying the price for Trump's audacity and what he wants to say when he's in the Oval Office. And then he, gets out of these meetings and is like, oh, shoot, I was just talking a lot of game and I don't have anything to back it up. Americans are getting less in return. It's deeper than food, but also what's not deeper than food? Like, if we can't feed ourselves, what are we even doing? And there's this Angela Davis quote about like, yeah, we have all this freedom in America that we love to talk about, but what does that mean if we don't have food? Is that the freedom to starve? And that's what we're seeing here. We have all of these fake freedoms. We live in the richest country in the world, and people have to put their groceries on layaway, can't get McDonald's without saying, can I pay you back on my next check? And all because Trump wants to talk big and bad on to international trade partners.
Yeah. And, one statistic I really want to bring up, because I think over the next few months, we're going to see that number go through the roof. It's already ridiculous, but I think, two numbers, actually. One is that, over the last few decades, we've had about 500,000 people who are homeless at any given time in the United States a year. That number has now risen by 18% over the last 2 years. I think 2023, it rose by 12%. Last year, it rose by 18%. Yeah. We now have close to 750,000 people who are houseless. Couple that with the fact that every single year, as reported by Feeding America, there is about 47.4 million people in the United States who face hunger, and 13.8 of them are children. You have a society that is going hungry, that is that, to your point, is a part of the richest country in the world that can't feed its citizens. Yeah. And I've heard quotes before where someone would say, it's not a matter of do we not have, right? We don't have access to these resources. These things do not exist. It's that, and now, right, Trump has now created a scarcity, but also it is in many areas where we do have more, we don't provide, because we live in such an individualistic society where what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, not realizing that we can combine forces and resources that actually will enable for us to feed not just ourselves, our community, our families in our community. And so when you have this tension that is being created, right, where the us against them mentality doesn't allow for me to walk down the street and borrow sugar from my neighbor, let alone be aware of when things are wrong in the community, because people aren't talking to each other. And so we have to get out of the space in which we're allowing our government to dictate how we interact with each other, but also how we take care of each other, because we do have a responsibility to each other that far exceeds what our government does. But oftentimes our responsibility to each other is reflected in how our tax dollars are being utilized to ensure that the 47.4 million people in the U.S. no longer go hungry, or the 750,000 people in the U.S. are able to find a shelter and have somewhere to lay their head at night.
Yeah. Oh, my God. And what's scary is that the rise in this unhoused, that stat that you just shared of people who are unhoused, does not mean that those people are not working. There's a new book that's coming out. Hopefully we can have him on at some point, by Brian Goldstone. It's called There Is No Place for Us Working and Homeless in America. There are so many people working full-time jobs, multiple jobs, who are living out of their cars, who are going to shelters each night, We're trying to figure out a way to afford the rising rent on top of the rising groceries and deciding, you know what, maybe I can only feed myself and I can't afford a house at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That should not be. That should not be. I don't think we should have homeless people at all in the richest country in the world, but certainly not people who are actually working, who are keeping this economy going. And so the metrics that we're using to gauge whether our economy is thriving are insufficient. Like, what does any of that mean? People are homeless. No one chooses that. People are at the end of their shift, showering at a gym and then going to their car to sleep, if they have one, finding a safe place whatever safe place that they can to sleep. And that should not be. And this administration keeps claiming that we're going to do these short-term sacrifices for long-term gains. You know, the Department of Government Efficiency, we're going to make all these cuts and eventually it's going to weigh in. Elon Musk is making some insane promise of, with all these Doge cuts, every American's going to get a stimulus check and they're going to see the money in their pockets. No, you're gutting our government. We're not seeing any benefits for it. People are struggling now. There is no wait around for some fictitious check that Elon Musk is going to send. There's no riding this out. That is a luxury that so many of our communities do not have. The real question is, how do we build an economy that serves us, not the stock market, not stakeholders, not executives, not CEOs, not lobbyists, us, the American people, working class people, people who clock in and clock out, have real responsibilities to do every day. Do not have second and third homes when one burns down. Do not have second and third homes when one floods. Like, what are we going to do? And unfortunately, so many of the people who fit into that we put their faith in this Trump administration and are now seeing what happens when you trust a white supremacist, a sexist, a homophobe, and someone with absolutely no governing experience to run our economy and our international affairs. We see that.
Yeah. I think that's why I get frustrated when I see folks online talk about, you know, we've been through worse, but some of us didn't make it. Yeah. Like literally some of us didn't make it, whether we're talking about slavery, whether we're talking about the Jim Crow South, whether we're talking about segregation, whether or not we're talking about mass incarceration, like so many of us did not make it. So while we culturally have been through worse, we can't negate the people who will not survive going hungry, who will not survive not having a roof over their head. Also, I feel like I don't know how to explain it. It almost feels like a breaking of the spirit, right? When you have people who've been told their entire lives, especially millennials, and we can say a lot about Gen X, you know, the silent generation, Gen X, they deserve it too. But so many millennials who in Gen Zers, I think we're told our entire lives that if we work hard, if we go to school, if we, you know, become an active and good Samaritan, a good citizen, that we too would have access to the American dream. And so many of us are putting in our 40, 50, 60 hours. We're going to our 9 to 5. We're doing our side hustle. We're doing social media. We're doing Uber, driving Uber. And yet we still can't get a hold of this quote unquote American dream. And like, the question is, does it no longer exist anymore? Or at least for the vast majority of us who did everything we were supposed to do and still don't see the fruits of our labor, because we have individuals in office who are finding ways to pad their own pockets and the pockets of their cronies without giving a damn about the vast majority of us who actually have to exist in the neighborhoods and the communities that we live in.
Yeah, 1,000,000%, 1,000,000%. As you've said, I mean, it's just, this economy was not made for us. Like, they not like us, for real, for real.
This world was not made for us.
At the top. And I saw something the other day, and it was saying the average American is 3 bad months away from being homeless. The average American is not 3 good months away from being a billionaire. So this aspiration, like the chances that anyone listening to this is going to become a billionaire, astronomically small. The chances that Trump's actions, that getting fired unexpectedly, that having a medical crisis unexpectedly, that debt balloon before your very eyes and erases any savings that you might have, that is a lot more feasible. So when we're building solidarity, we have to remember that. Like, class solidarity is, we are closer to being unhoused than we are to being filthy rich. So let's stop building an economy for the filthy rich and trusting the filthy rich to have our backs. The filthy rich got rich on our backs by saying, let's pay you the bare minimum so that I can do it. so that the stakeholders can get the maximum profit margin and return on investment as possible. And we bear that price. And so we have to get better. Like we can't, this is not about, I mean, at a certain point, you can't budget smart with crumbs. Right. Like,
no, you can't save your way out of poverty. And I think that's one of the misconceptions. You can't hustle and save your way out of poverty. And even if you do, right, you are 1 in a billion. Right. It is very unlikely. To your point, you have more likelihood of being destitute, of experiencing poverty than you will ever have in relationship to the billionaire class. And also, like, who wants to be a billionaire anyway? Like, I mean, and I say that as someone who actually cares about other people, because to be a billionaire in this country or anywhere in the world, somewhere along your supply chain, someone is being hurt. Someone is being exploited. You are paying someone slave wages. You do not become a billionaire outside of being a Nepo baby, where you could say I have a little bit, separation to myself. But if you are a self-made billionaire in this country, you are doing something bad to get there. And that's everyone. There is not, billionaires should not exist. Trillionaires should not exist, because to do so means that you are doing something bad along the supply chain that is actually harmful to the communities that you claim to either come from or care about. And even if you don't care about it, but because many of these billionaires don't, someone is being hurt in order to absorb that amount of wealth that you are hoarding for yourself, when hundreds of thousands of millions of people are going hungry every year. It reminds me back in a few years ago where Elon Musk, I think, was bashing maybe it was the UN or the World Bank, one of those entities, and was basically saying, why haven't we solved hunger? And they were like, well, you could actually solve hunger. You have enough money as one individual to solve hunger. And that is the same with the vast majority of billionaires. If we just taxed billionaires for the taxes that they owe, no more, no less, we could solve the vast majority of social issues in this country. But because billionaires are not paying their fair share, the rest of us have to pay more of our money in order to assume that our most basic necessities, like our roads and schools and our health institutions, are properly prepared to be able to serve us. So on that note, we're going to take a quick break. You are watching On the Other Side of Change with myself and co-host Brea Baker, and it's only on the Black Star Network.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
everyone. You are watching On the Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network. Now, before we took a break, we talked about the economic implications the Trump administration is having on everyday Americans. And there's a clip we want to show you from a recent episode of Racial Metal on MSNBC that talks, showcase a clip from Trump's Commerce Secretary as he talks about people's access to their Social Security checks.
But this statement today from Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary about what Trump is doing to Social Security, this tape is such a political disaster. I feel like I almost have to close my eyes because I can't bear to watch it. Just, here you go. Check it out.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up and she'll get it next month.
Yeah.
A fraudster always makes the loudest noise, screaming, yelling, and complaining.
Oh my God. Like, you know how diabolical that is to say that?
Like, he literally called people fraudsters for wanting their money on time.
And thank you for bringing that up, because people think that, Social Security is some fairy dust of money, pot money that the government gives to us poor and working class folks. No, this is money that everyday Americans put in for 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 years and are asking for it back, as is their right. And these are not entitlements, right? Even though they are entitlements, because they should be something that we are entitled to as U.S. citizens if we are putting into the pot of money to ensure our livelihood. And to hear a billionaire, a billionaire tell us, sit in a room with other billionaires, tell us, or multimillionaires, whatever you want to call it, tell us that if we complain about not receiving our money, that we are a fraudster. Not totally overlooking the fact that that's literally the entire administration.
Yeah. I think what it goes to is, number one, that how out of touch they are. That the average person cannot afford to say, I'll just hope that they get it right next month. No, I need bills paid now. I need groceries paid now. I need to live now. And for 30, 40, 50 years, I've been paying into it. And anyone who works, which is probably most people who are tuning into this podcast. Like, every time you see your check and they take out the taxes and they take out the Social Security and they take out for unemployment, and it's like, man, I could really use that money this month, but I have no choice but to pay into it. It's taken out for me. I have no choice in the matter. And now when it's finally time for me to reap the benefits of having paid into that for decades, you want me to be patient with mistakes, which is not really mistakes, which is withholding. You're withholding my money and telling me, well, if you complain about it, you're a fraudster. Otherwise, you would just go so out of touch with the average.
Otherwise, you would just comply. And that's what this entire administration wants folks to do, is just to comply, regardless of how many bad things happen on our watch in broad daylight. We should just comply. We should just take it, because we should assume best intention. And no, because as like we've talked about this so many times before, the vast majority of Americans can't afford a $200 emergency. The vast majority of Americans are 3 months, working Americans are 3 months away from being in poverty. So people cannot afford to not get paid 1 month. I mean, I make very good money, but even I would be like, where the hell is my check if it doesn't come every month? Because we all have bills to pay. We all have to support ourselves. And this is the same group of people that say that Americans are looking for handouts. And actually, we're just saying, give us the money that we invested, that you told us, you forced us to invest. And now you're saying that we're looking for handouts. The biggest handout, the biggest folks who are receiving handouts in this country are those who aren't paying taxes. And we know who those are. They're damn sure not the working class Americans.
Preach, preach, preach. And I think what's also frustrating is they're telling us to not be loud, but these are the same people who would be in an uproar, who are trying to oust CEOs the moment they have a bad financial quarter for a company that they've invested in. Let's be real. They got to these places by being very loud about what they wanted, by not accepting no as an answer. And also, let's remember who we're talking about. Social Security recipients are the elderly. And unfortunately, we don't live in a country where the elderly have paid off homes and they're only using Social Security for groceries, property taxes, and vacations. These are still people paying mortgages. These are people raising grandchildren and supplementing their children because they are dealing with a cost of living that is astronomically higher than what they had to deal with. But also, these are people for whom they have given decades and decades of their life to building up this American economy. And the moment that they want to call up that same economy and say, hey, aren't you supposed to work for me? They're fraudsters. They're impatient. They're too loud. If those are the labels and the descriptors used to talk about older people, God forbid a young person speak up about not getting something that they deserve. That's why you see us getting jailed and deported and silenced by our universities, because they just don't want any dissent. They don't want anyone disagreeing with what this administration is doing, even when this administration is wrong, dead wrong, like super duper wrong, even beyond the Social Security. There was a recent article and like news story about how the IRS is turning over information to ICE about immigrants. Oh, so you mean they were paying taxes?
Literally, they pay millions of dollars in taxes every year.
Oh, okay. Got it. So everyone's expected to pay in. They can't demand anything in return. And in exchange for using the freedom of speech that the far right loves to proclaim is so important here, people are being ridiculed on national stages. Like I just the gall to actually call elderly fraudsters is mind-blowing. But I think it gets us to this place where we remember this economy was not built for us. It became the richest country in the world, not because the individual citizens of this country are each experiencing wealth and prosperity and abundance, but because the few at the top are. And we all have to suffer the consequences.
And also, this is a reminder of just how devastating the pulling up the ladder the baby boomer generation had on the rest of us, right? And ironically enough, they're now being the ones directly impacted by these kind of policies because they are retired and they are receiving their Social Security. Baby boomers were able to take advantage of some of the best safety nets that our country has ever created. And what did they do once they bought their home and they paid off their home and they bought their car and they had their house and white picket fence and their 2.5 children? They pulled the ladder up behind them. These things have long-term implications, and to assume that the boomerang was never going to come back and hit you, now people are really effing around and finding out. So it's quite annoying as someone who's been working since they were 14 to now tell me that potentially Social Security will not be there by the time I retire, and that I should just, get along because the moment I'm too loud, I must be stealing something, right? The gaslighting knows no bounds, and they're trying to make people really question whether or not they should be making this financial sacrifice for the government when the government isn't making that same sacrifice for them.
Exactly, 1,000,000%. And so now it begs the question, like, what does it mean for the government to work for us? There's, that famous quote, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what your country can do for you.
That's literally what the country is for. I get into arguments so many times with folks where they were like, Americans rely too much on the government. Yes. Because we pay for that kind of access. What do you mean?
Literally.
This is supposed to be when you pay the amount of taxes and your legal system and your legislative system is set up the way it is. There is a level of expectation that, yes, you are going to serve me. My money is what you are using to prop up this government. So what? Yes. I want access to every resource and opportunity that is available to me. Why wouldn't we? Why shouldn't we have that expectation?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Because that's the entire claim for government. Those who are anti-government are also anti-taxes. I'm not anti-taxes. I want to pay my taxes so that I can get public schools, public libraries, good roads, well-lit communities, and activities for people of all ages, and federal agencies that are actually doing what the hell they're supposed to be doing. So what does it actually mean to have majestic? I know, look, I was about to say something else, but what does it mean? And I think I was never more inspired than at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, when it just felt like the average American was really saying, what can I do for the person next to me? How can I demand and say, like, hey, we're distributing money and resources better than the government, and we're forcing the government to do better by us. We're forcing the government to really care about disseminating the things we need, mutual aid networks, making sure people were getting food, making sure people were getting PPE. And we said that was going to be our new normal. We kind of went back on that, but now we're realizing more than ever, we are interdependent. Our economy is only working so much as it works for each individual. If I'm doing okay and my neighbors are not, we are not doing okay. And this idea that like, I just got to worry about me, stack my paper, get rich, and sit behind a gated community is not going to work. So like, how do we reimagine this? How do we make it work? I mean, I would love a government that feels more like every US citizen is, and every US resident is a stakeholder. Yeah. In the same way that stakeholders of a corporation feel very entitled to having a return on investment, we deserve that. You take our taxes all year round, and then come March, April, you take more. Maybe you give some of us a refund, but like ultimately, I haven't gotten a refund in a while. So you taking more. I want that to do something. I want it to work for us. Every dollar should be doing something. It should not be stale and static, right? Like, I don't know, what is your ideal pie in the sky economy? How could it work for us better?
I mean, I definitely would prefer that the vast majority of our funds are not used for military. Like when we look at the breakdown of the US government, I'm a firm believer that you can always tell where a politician truly stands by how they balance their budget, what they invest their dollars in, and not even their dollars, how they invest our dollars. And so the fact that we spend so much money on military alone, I think is truly obnoxious, especially when we have so many people suffering here at home who are not able to have access to their most basic needs. We could live in a country where everyone has a house, or at the very least has a home, where everyone has food to eat, where people have access to healthcare. And this would still be a rich country. People would still have millions of dollars, but yet you have a handful of billionaires who are seeking to hoard so much money for themselves and don't want to pay their fair share of taxes. So for me, a pie in the sky would be that everyone is paying their fair share of taxes and that our balance books or our budgets are reflective of the needs of the American people and not just, padding the pockets of the military industrial complex, because that has never created, at least in my lifetime, a prosperous world for people who look like me to be able to have some sort of collective upward mobility.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I'm with you. And like, for me, the step towards that I would just add to what you said is I just don't think that billionaires should exist at all. I think that the moment you hit $999,999,000,
sounds like a lot of money.
You are taxed to make sure you never go above that amount, which I say that. And I took the time saying that number because you know how wealthy you still are without being a billionaire. You could be a multi-hundred millionaire and live a amazing life, still have multiple homes, each with their own pools and pool houses,
have a mega yacht,
still vacation in all the places, still golf on the weekends and whatever. Like you can have a great life. You do not need $1 billion. There's no way that people can amass that much money without it coming at someone else's expense. There's no way you can spend it all without it coming at someone else's expense. Yeah. I just firmly believe that I would love to live in a country where the max that people are allowed to accrue is $999 million. And after that point, your money goes into the taxes. And honestly, at that point, like you're trying to position yourself as a philanthropist anyway. So just stand on it. Do what you
That's
say
the funny
you do.
part about philanthropy. Oftentimes they're trying to solve the issues that they themselves created with their greed. When you could just pay your fair share of taxes.
Literally just pay your fair share of taxes. And then I'm just like, I think a lot of times also what you hear billionaires talking about, especially when it comes election time, is the fear. Oh, I feel so afraid of home invasions. People want what I have. People are trying to rob me. I have to go around with private security. If people were not if wealth inequality did not exist as drastically as it did, if people were not so poor in the same place where you get to be so rich, you might not have anything to be afraid of. Like if we had a standard quality of life, maybe through like a guaranteed income or reparations or universal health care and free college, like you wouldn't have to be as worried about things because people would know that there's a certain baseline quality of life that they can look forward to. My kids will be able to go to school. If something happens, we'll be able to get healthcare. I'm not going to die under crushing medical debt. Like we'll be able to access these things without me needing to rob you. And I know a lot of
interrupt you. Oh my God, I wish we had the clip of Tupac talking about that. Like, if I keep asking for food, if I keep asking and I'm asking politely and you're still not doing this, eventually people will rob you. Like, people will take up arms because they're debating between, am I going to feed my kids or am I going to make you uncomfortable for a few minutes? And I think a lot of people would prefer to make you uncomfortable versus having their children go hungry.
Absolutely. So crimes of survival. And so the best way to eradicate the need for crimes of survival and to actually only be dealing with people who are pathologically trying to hurt one another is to get rid of why are people clawing to survive? What if we created a world where everyone had what they needed to eat? Everyone had what they needed to have quality housing, not mildew and mold and rat and roach infested housing, but good housing. I promise you, so many people would mind their business, want to mind their business, do not want to take your car, do not want to run up in your home. People want to live regular lives, playing video games in their own house, taking their kids on a beautiful stroll in a beautiful neighborhood, but they're being corralled into ghettos and told that is acceptable while you can have acres and acres and acres and they're having to ration water while you can have a water fountain that runs 24/7 and you don't want people to look and say, I want what they got. Like, we would have so much less public safety issues, public health issues, all of the things if we remembered our interdependence. And so I just would love to see the wealthy remembering that a little bit more. Like, no, you don't need to be afraid of being the next United Healthcare CEO. Just like, do right by people. Do right by people. That's it. I mean, it just feels so simple. Just do the right thing, like Spike Lee said. And I promise we would see so much less uproar and unrest, and people want to be able to live beautiful lives of eating fruit and enjoying their families and their neighbors and smiles on their faces. People are not angry for no reason. The anger is righteous. I'm not saying that how people choose to go about it is necessarily the right thing, but ultimately trying to give accountability in a country with so much injustice is just nonsensical.
Yeah, the anger is not only justified, but it's also manufactured because every problem we have in our society could be solved. Yeah, it's not a matter of lack of resources, it's a matter of prioritizing people over profit. With that being said, we're going to take a quick break. You are watching On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
We are back with The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Whew, I could rant and rave with you, Jamira, all day long about our economy, how it's not working, why capitalism is failing us. But I hope that this beginnings of this conversation really put new insights into people's ears and are making people really think, like, how can this government and this economy work more for me? So I hope that you are pushed, those listening, to just imagine more for yourselves politically. And again, as we always say, this conversation is far from over, but we are just trying to spark your minds that there is more possible on the other side of change.
And in the words of Tupac, I may not change the world, but I will spark the brain that will change the world, which is why we believe in providing you additional resources to keep the learning going so that you can continue to, unlearn the things you've been taught, but also teach someone else something different. So to continue to learn more about this topic, check out Evil Geniuses, The Unmaking of America by Kirk Anderson. And then there is No Place for Us, Working and Homeless in America by Brian Goldstone. And follow groups such as the Working Family Party and the Center for Law and Social Policies, organizations that are working on the front lines to ensure that the issues of the working class are front and center, and that we can continue to make sure that the entitlements that we are entitled to as human and civil rights continue to become accessible to each and every one of us.
Yeah. And don't believe the lie. You are not a fraudster for asking for more. It is your God-given right. Keep demanding more, staying engaged, organizing. Until next time, keep pushing for a just future.